protests enter their 13th day. Banned opposition party, the Muslim Brotherhood, says it's joining government talks aimed at ending the crisis. The group had previously rejected all dialogue until President Mubarak stepped down. Meanwhile, his son Gamal and the other leaders of the ruling National Democratic Party have resigned. The party's new Secretary-General, Hossam Badrawi, is reported to have good relations with opposition figures. And there have been mixed messages from the United States. The State Department has distanced itself from comments by US envoy Frank Wisner, who's backed Mubarak's plan to stay in power until September. Well, let's tell you a little more now about the Muslim Brotherhood. The group has maintained a presence in Egyptian politics, whether officially or unofficially, for almost 80 years. It was set up in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna as an Islamist movement. Its stated objective was the implementation of Sharia or Islamic law, and it was opposed to British rule in Egypt. It was banned in 1954 after the attempted assassination of President Gamal Abdel al-Nasser. But the group continued to operate as an underground movement, and it distanced itself from violence. In 2005, candidates standing as independents won 20% of parliamentary seats. But in elections last year, it failed to win a single seat. Well, Joshua Staker is a Middle East expert and politics professor at Kent State University in Pittsburgh. He says Egypt's transition of power will be tainted by Mubarak's past politics.
I think that these talks and the Muslim Brotherhood's participation in them are you know, another sign that the protesters are sort of losing some steam. While they've really battled admirably and their cause is, I think, the right one, I think ultimately, you know, the transition has started, and if they want to get on board and be a part of it, they're going to have to kind of figure a way to get in the room. So if they try to use the Muslim Brotherhood, I guess that would be at least one way. I guess it will really depend on who from the Muslim Brotherhood is in that room. But I think that the outside world has intervened just about as much as it can by not intervening at all. The transition is underway in Egypt, and you know, with Vice President Suleiman and the cabinet and now the party all lined up, as well as the sort of Council of Wise Men that have met with him and the opposition parties. I mean, really, it's just it's sort of a foregone conclusion. If you want to get in and have a seat at the table, you got to get in now.
So how are the latest developments in and outside Egypt playing out on the internet? Here's Stephanie Scowen with a look at that from our Egypt desk. Steph.
Thanks, Darren. Well, I've been looking at social media sites for the last few hours now for comments about Egypt, and while the majority of them have been serious, this one brought a smile to my face. Hassan Barjas commenting, Mubarak to change his Facebook relationship status with Egypt to, it's complicated. Hermanes has been doing the math on the Mubarak years. She says during Mubarak's 30 years as president, there have been 9 Israeli presidents, 3 French and 5 American. And while the day has arrived in Doha, UK Kure writes, tweets are feeding the brain and melting the heart, but Mubarak's sound asleep. It's impossible, of course, to say how well the president has been sleeping, but one artist has been dreaming of how he sees the new day in Cairo. This cartoon on TwitPics shows the sun rising over Tahrir Square. The word on the sun simply reads, democracy. Well, as Egypt wakes up, we'll be monitoring events throughout the day, so if you see or hear anything, we'd love to know about it. If you've got video or images of events inside Egypt, please send them to our Your Media site. The address is yourmedia.aljazeera.net. And of course, you can check our website for the latest news, and that can be found at aljazeera.net/English. You'll find live blogs there and the latest videos. But before I go, Darren, take a look at this great picture from Egypt. It shows a happy bride and groom beginning their honeymoon with the protesters in Tahrir Square. That's them posing in front of an armoured personnel carrier. And Habib has tweeted he hopes President Mubarak makes it to the cake cutting. But with all those protesters in the square, it'd have to be a very big cake. So that's it from me, Darren. Back to you.
Very big indeed. Stephanie, thank you very much. Let's get some other news now, shall we? Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a ceasefire as tensions resurfaced over a disputed border region. At least 5 people died in 2 days of fighting close to a 900-year-old temple both sides claim as their own. Andrew Potter now reports.
Cambodian soldiers exchange fire with Thai forces on a section of border which has become a flashpoint between the countries. This battle coming minutes after both sides had agreed to a ceasefire following a clash on Friday which killed 3 Cambodian soldiers and a Thai villager. It's the latest flare-up in a long-running dispute over the area around a 900-year-old temple on Cambodian land. Thai nationalist groups are pressuring their government to take it back. This fighting lasted half an hour, and when the guns fell silent, at least one Thai soldier was dead and a dozen from both sides injured. The temple being fought over was damaged, along with several other buildings. Some villagers took what shelter they could, while the Thai government evacuated more than 3,000 people. Cambodia and Thailand have engaged in frequent firefights over the temple, but they've never escalated into all-out war. With both governments accusing each other of aggression, the United States has pleaded with both countries to defuse the standoff. Andrew Potter, Al Jazeera.
At least 5 people have died in Sri Lanka after widespread flooding caused by days of torrential rain. Hundreds of thousands have been affected, and the country's disaster management centre is struggling to cope. Manil Fernandez reports from Colombo.
The waters raged once again, sweeping everything in their path. Worst hit was the north-central province. Swollen irrigation tanks breaching their banks. One reported to have unleashed around 55,000 cubic acres of water. Many villagers were cut off by the floodwater, boats their only hope. Over 1 million people have been affected, and more than 230,000 have been forced to leave their homes for temporary shelters. In the Central Highlands, authorities issued a landslide alert and declared a state of emergency in some areas.
Our kitchen was buried by a landslide at the back of the house.
It wasn't just people facing hardships. This baby elephant was among the wildlife caught by rising waters. The military and police are helping with the rescue and relief efforts. But despite the devastation, there were some moments of hope. This baby born on a helicopter as her mother was flown to safety. In Colombo, charities are trying to gather food and clothing to send to victims. But they face a major problem delivering this aid, as many roads are impassable. Emergency supplies and food stocks are being loaded up behind me to be taken to the hundreds of thousands of people affected by this latest round of flooding. But it'll take a whole lot more for those affected by this latest disaster to get on their feet again. Manil Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
Australia continues to feel the effects of one of the biggest ever cyclones to hit the country. The giant storm first struck Queensland, but its tail is being felt thousands of kilometres away in the southern state of Victoria. Wild storms lashed the city of Melbourne, bringing destructive winds and flash flooding. More than 175 millimetres of rain fell in just a few hours, also inundating rural areas. In Côte d'Ivoire, thousands have voiced their anger at the involvement of Burkina Faso's president in attempts to resolve the post-election crisis. The youths are loyal to incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo, who refuses to step down after Alassane Ouattara was ruled the winner of November's presidential election. Gbagbo supporters are suspicious of Blaise Compaoré and the African Union's involvement. Republicans are gathering in the U.S. state of California to mark the 100th anniversary of former President Ronald Reagan's birth. For some politicians, the commemoration is a chance to link themselves to one of the party's most celebrated icons. Cody Akavi reports.
As an actor, he was overshadowed by bigger stars. As a president, few can match his legacy. But that hasn't stopped Republicans from trying to play the part.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Ronald Reagan's self-deprecating manner endeared him to most Americans. And on the 100th anniversary of his birth, today's conservatives are lining up to salute the man and issue a warning.
Though government created the problem, now government presents itself as the solution.
America's 40th president sold himself as a champion of limited government.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Reagan reformed the tax code and deregulated markets.
We're going to turn the bull loose.
But he also exploded the national debt with defense spending. He fought the Cold War much more aggressively than his predecessors.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In reality, Reagan was a far more divisive leader. His approval ratings often hovered around 50%, But his Republican descendants have elevated his status to icon of the conservative movement.
He refused to sit down and be silent as our liberties were eroded by an out-of-control, centralized government that overtaxed and overreached in utter disregard of constitutional limits.
A new generation of Republican politicians are connecting themselves to his legacy.